baseball.
This is the Redbird Report with sports director Brendan Wiese and Bob Ramsey.
Powered by Rawlings and the Rawlings Experience
On the Big 550 KTRS.
Rawlings Redbird Report is here on the Big 550 KTRS or KTRS digital platforms like YouTube and the KTRS app. Brendan Wiese, Bob Ramsey with you. We record this a little more than a week in front of the home opener. We've got very little spring training left to talk about. And remember, that's a good thing. I'm ready to talk about real games. We can talk some real baseball later on in the show because the Tokyo series is in the books, the Cubbies and the Dodgers. Man, that's a great sign. And now we can get a little bit closer to baseball that will actually be in the record books here soon.
Yeah, it's all fun. I agree. We're all ready to get it going. And despite the hand-wringing and teeth gnashing about the Cardinals roster, and that's not a shot at people. I'm including myself as a hand-wringer. And so, yeah, it's the minutia of that stuff that we get worked up about. But that, to me, that's part of the fun.
Well, let's start with the guy that we've talked a lot about this spring, and rightfully so. He's been right smack dab in the middle of everything. He's had an incredible spring. It's Victor Scott, and he hit another home run here, I think, today. As, again, we record this. There's some talk. Okay, how do you manage this thing? The Cardinals haven't made a move yet. Michael Ciani would appear to be the most likely to make the club as a fourth or fifth outfielder, and Victor Scott, the way things are aligned right now, would be destined to go to Memphis. And remember, go ahead.
Now,
go ahead.
How are you reading the tea leaves that way?
I'm reading it that the outfield would be situated. Brendan Donovan in left, Newt Barr in center, and Jordan Walker in right, with Nolan Gorman at second base. If Gorman is on the team, he's going to play, and he's more than likely going to play at second base. And there's that trickle-down effect, as we've talked about before. And I know you don't necessarily agree with Gorman getting that run if he's not hitting. This is more along as I don't agree with any of this, but this is how I kind of see the Cardinals letting this play out. And if Victor Scott's not playing every day, he would then be sent down to Memphis. So how do you see it, Rammer?
I see that if the Cardinals do that, it proves they have no idea what they're doing. It's insane. How can you ask somebody to perform, then they perform, and you don't play them because of somebody who might perform down the road? It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, I want to offer a disclaimer. I don't know that Victor Scott, if he was in the big leagues leading off and playing every day, would be good. He might do exactly what he did last year, fail and go back down. But that's why you have options. Why is this such a difficult deal? You came in, you did everything you needed to do. You've got a high upside. You are a dynamic player offensively and defensively. And defensively, well, they really need both. To send him down to put a 200 strikeout a year guy in the lineup doesn't make any sense to me. The way I would clean that up if I was like the Cardinals and insisted that Gorman make the club, I'd look at a Gorman-Walker platoon. Now, they don't play the same position, but the versatility of Donovan allows you in the batting order to platoon Gorman and Walker, and it might actually help both of those guys. You know, your job in management in sports is to put people in a position to succeed. And so if Gorman's hitting all right-handed pitchers and Walker's hitting lefties, right, it gives you that opportunity. Then you can shift some stuff around. I don't like having two second basemen playing. I'd like that to be solid, but I just understand that the Cardinals are going to go with Gorman, and I'm just trying to figure out a way to make it work.
And this is where it comes down to how much does spring training matter, right? Has this been a competition for Victor Scott? Has he played so well where he could no longer be considered an option for the fourth outfielder because they want him to get the reps and play every day?
I don't think you can have him or Ciani as a fourth guy. Basically because they're the same guy, right? Not just to mention high upside and all those kinds of things. So I don't see either one of them as a fourth outfielder. I don't think it makes sense. Maybe Ciani because he's a year older. But boy, that would be a shame. How would you? I would ask Mozeliak. I would ask Ali. I would ask anybody in the organization. I would ask any fan. And I'm asking you, how would you feel if you're Victor Scott and you get sent out?
I'd be pretty disenchanted, right? I'd be really disappointed.
I'd tell my agent, tell him to trade me. I'm not going back up. Tell him to trade me as the what did the goalie in Slapshot say? Right effing now. Trade me. And I would. How can you rationalize that? I just don't see it.
Well, again, this comes down to again, what does spring training mean? The Cardinals already had all of this kind of locked in
apparently
weeks ago, right? And all of these spring training efforts meant nothing. Gorman's been terrible. Walker's been hurt. Nootbaar's been good. Donovan has been great, but he's playing, right? He's one of your guys, and I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned about his spring training numbers.
No.
So Victor Scott's been so good. He's been the Cardinals' best spring training player. And to your point about Victor Scott telling his agent to go to the Cardinals and tell him to trade me, that's not so far off base when you consider Victor Scott is not like this super young rookie that has all of these years to develop. He's
24.
He's 24, 100% right. And that's not old, but it's older for a prospect. And it's older for a prospect to go tell him and say, nah, you got to go down and continue to play every day and wait for your time. Like, his time is now. If it's going to happen for a guy like a Victor Scott, you can't sit around and wait. And that's where, again, the Cardinals' planning this entire time has been so incredibly flawed, from the declaration that Arenado was going to be traded to the point where we're at now, where he's clearly not going to be traded. And all of these, like Victor Scott playing at this level, Rammer, would have been a shoo-in to start in center field, and everything sort of play out with Donovan at second, Gorman at third, your outfield situated, your DH situated. Like, this is what they wanted to do, and it made all the sense in the world. But you told the world it didn't happen, and now you're stuck in this really awkward spot where one of the guys you asked to step up was Victor Scott, and he was the guy we said at the start of the year, who do we want to have the best spring training? I think we both answered around Victor Scott, one of our top two guys.
Yeah.
He delivers, and then you've got to tell him, you can't stay here. Yeah, what?
Now,
I don't know. I don't know how he's going to react other than negatively to news like this.
Now, we got a week, and while we're going apoplectic, and maybe fans are too, he hasn't been sent out.
No.
So perhaps there's still an opportunity there, but I agree with you. The sense you get by what's been spoken, and maybe more by what's been unspoken, it gives us pause.
It really does. And I think for the Cardinals right now, your outfield and what you've gotten out of these guys, the outfielders and Nootbaar's, I want to talk about Nootbaar a little bit later, but the outfield situation is what it is. If Gorman's at second, that means Donovan's in the outfield. If Gorman can't play third, that means Arenado's there. I mean, Gorman is sort of he's the linchpin here, and the Cardinals have decided, and it's been written about and spoken about, that they are hell-bent on getting him those at-bats. And I'm not necessarily against it, but if it's at the cost of a player that might deserve the opportunity more and might make more out of said opportunity, Rammer. I mean, this season is supposed to be a season for opportunities, for springboards, for some of these younger guys. And you're kind of at a crossroads here, ultimately, what you do with Victor Scott. And obviously they can go around and change their minds if they have to, if Gorman gets off to a slow start. But the way things are drawn up right now, I feel like this is ultimately the path they're going to go down. I want to talk about Ciani, though. So if he's not starting in center field, you would not have him on the roster? Is that how I read it?
There are so many moving parts. That's hard to say. you only have 4 guys on the bench. So to have a guy that's only going to come in and play defense, couple innings, I just don't know if you can, in today's game, you can afford that luxury. But they may have to, because if Nootbaar is your everyday center fielder, he's what, adequate, do we think? Is that a fair statement, or do we think he's better than adequate as a center fielder?
I'd say that it kind of falls on the lines of Ivan Herrera, right? He's potentially an upgrade for you at the plate, and you live with the defense. And it comes back to I've been a Ciani hater this entire time. You can ask Ben Fred about it last year. No knock on the young man. Seems like a very good dude. But in today's modern baseball, how can you carry a defensive-only outfielder and expect to get value from that? If he hits 250 and gets on base at a 330 or 340 clip,
but if he's not playing all the time, how's he going to do that? And does it matter?
Right. But how can you play him all the time?
You can't.
You can't. Right. There's no pathway for him. He got those opportunities last year due to injuries, and he made the most of it. But I think we conflate that a little bit. And I talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago, where Cardinal fans, a guy hits well for a week, and we're building the Hall of Fame statue for him. Like, Ciani was fine, but he's not someone I think that needs to be part of the long-term conversation. If you need him on this team, and if he fills a role right now, that's all fine and good. But yeah, I don't see the need to jam him in here.
I agree.
By the same token, I also don't want to have Victor Scott sit up here on the big league club and get 5 at-bats per week, because that will probably adversely affect him.
I don't think that is an issue.
Okay.
I don't think they would do that.
I
really don't think so.
I don't think they will either.
Well, and what I would do, and they've got their reasons, but if it ended today, now, Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman could go 5 for 5 for a week and every day for a week, and all of a sudden their numbers look great.
Yeah.
Okay, you're red hot. You made the team. But as of today, I think they both should be at Memphis, and Gorman should be playing third base every day down there, because I think the Cardinals still want to move Arenado, and Walker just hasn't hit. He's got that injury thing. We talked about this last week.
Yep.
Let him go down. He's only 22. Why do you have to force feed him? And I think if you took both of those guys off the big league roster, the rest of it would fall into place like that.
Yeah. I think for Walker, especially if he ends up there eventually, like if he struggles again, do you send him down in the middle of April? And what does that do to the young man if he's got to be sent down for like a third time in 3 seasons, where they keep on having, well, we tried. I mean, I'll put it like this, Rammer. I am 100% in your camp. I think Walker should start at AAA to begin the year. How quickly he comes back will determine how he hits down there, right? But to me, it would be such an egregious mistake for them to call him up, or to let him play now, essentially play every day now, and then send him down again. If he makes the club on opening day, he's here, and he's playing every day, and you live with it. And so that's what I think that's what they should wrestle with, because if you send him down again, you as a ball club, you're admitting failure. You're killing his confidence wherever it is right now. I mean, confidence can't be high for that guy.
Yeah.
I think starting him at AAA now solves a lot of potential problems down the road, and you let him sort things out. And like you said, it allows Victor Scott then to start the season at the big league club where he's earned the job. Nootbaar moves to the corner. It doesn't necessarily solve the Donovan issue. Like, he's probably still in the outfield unless you put Gorman down there too. I think Gorman would stick up here though, and because they've given him so many at bats. I think you can, again, as we said, you can play off the injury to Walker and make it seem like it's sort of an injury designation for him.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything more to say on it. That the Cardinals are not assuming some of these moves are going to be made.
Yeah,
and if they're not, and everything falls into a logical line, then I'll back off and apologize. But right now, it looks like the Cardinals are saying performance doesn't matter. We decided what we want to do, and this is what we're going to do. And if underperformers are fair-haired children, then they're just going to play.
I've been asked this question a few times, and I know you've talked about it too, Rammer, that the ball club is inherently better with Arenado as the starting third baseman right now, as opposed to him not being here.
Yeah.
And that's the obvious question, like prisoner of the moment kind of thing. But if we think the Cardinals' plan is to continue to give more opportunity and have guys play and get better, the opportunity to trade him and not get it done is one that I think we'll look back on and say, what were these guys thinking? And when does it happen? And when do you make the move? Like, is he going to be on this team for the rest of his contract? I mean,
possible.
It is possible. And it's crazy to even wrap your head around that, where this team said they were at 3 months ago.
What will be interesting is what the Cardinals need to happen is a contender not have a productive third baseman. I don't want to wish injury on anybody, so I don't want to say somebody gets injured, but they need a right-handed power bat, and they need a third baseman. And so I believe the best shot to deal Arenado would be late July. And at that point, if that need from another team, a trade partner, is there, a real need, and they think they can win, that's when you could theoretically get a big haul for him and get from under that contract. But, so we're 4 months away from that, 5 months away from that. So we'll see.
I do feel like he does to get that. And I think that is a possibility. Like, he does have to find his old form. Like Arenado playing like he did last year or the year before, where he was, I still think he was above average defensively, but I do think he'd become an average offensive player, considering he doesn't get on base that much. The power numbers have to be there for Arenado to be a viable.
What's that number?
30 home runs?
I don't know if he's a 30 home run guy anymore. I think he was pretty productive and he drove in runs. And I think he would, if you with a contender that needs a bat and a third baseman, if you took his numbers from last year and put him on a contender for July, August, September in a stretch run, I think he's just fine.
I also think, baseball's changed so much where now, you've got guys that can't even, guys in their 20s. Remember Alex Verdugo? This guy wasn't a breakthrough major league outfielder, but has had some time on the Dodgers as a prospect and now the Red Sox and the Yankees. Verdugo never signed an off-season contract anywhere. Remember? That guy's still a left-handed bat. It is getting increasingly tougher for veteran players to establish themselves and establish their value in today's baseball marketplace. Like, if you were just a name, Nolan Arenado 10 years ago with his resume at this age, Rammer, I think the Cardinals would have moved him 3 months ago. But it's just a lot more difficult to do that now. And everything's about every little analytic. And there are certain numbers where Arenado just doesn't shine anymore at the plate. I know, and I think we disagree on that a little bit. But I think Arenado's on the wrong side of it, and he needs to be able to show he's capable of getting back to even those numbers a few years ago, where we're not that far removed from him being a top 3 MVP candidate. When Goldschmidt won, I think Arenado was third. So that guy isn't that far removed. And heck, that also shows Paul Goldschmidt wasn't that far removed from an MVP season.
And so the problem really still becomes the money and the age and the apparent age decline. And that's why a special need would have to come along to make Nolan valuable on the marketplace.
Yep. It's Bob Ramsey. I'm Brendan Wiese. It is our Rawlings Redbird report. Of course, Rawlings, a great backer of the show right here, Westport Plaza, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Big 550. If you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe. And if you're listening to the Big 550, continue to listen. We're going to come back and talk about the proposed here in the last few days 6-man rotation. We've kind of dabbled in that talk. Is it something viable to make this team better right now and maybe raise the value of some of these pitchers that could be on the move later in the year? We'll talk about it coming up next.
And now back to the Redbird Report with Brendan Wiese and Bob Ramsey on the Big 550. Powered by Rawlings and the Rawlings Experience.
Our Rawlings Redbird Report continues on the Big 550 KTRS. Along with Bob Ramsey, I'm Brendan Wiese. We're a little more than a week in front of the home opener down in Busch Stadium, downtown St. Louis, the Cardinals and the Twins. And Rammer, we know Sonny Gray is going to be the opening day starter, but is it going to be one of 5 starters for the Cardinals, or could this team really pull the trigger on a 6-man rotation? Is that wise?
Oh, well, that's 2 different questions. Could they? Yes. Is it wise? I don't like being the bottom line guy. I don't like being the results-oriented thinking guy. I don't necessarily, and in fact, often don't agree with results-oriented thinking. But if you want to get a guy in there like McGreevy, who's earned it, it goes back to what we were saying about some of the young position players. He's earned it. I mean, look at his numbers. Hadn't walked anybody. 0.77 whip. I mean, the guy's earned it. Now, but you also have contracts with Fetty and Matz and Michaelis and Gray. And, the thing that's got me is, and I don't want to dump on Andre Palante, but to me, it would make more sense to say, Andre, you're in the plans. You're part of the big league roster. You're going to start out in the bullpen till you kind of get things figured out. Or if you still want him in the rotation because you believe he will figure it out and you want to go to a 6-man, okay, but that leaves you with one less reliever. And major league teams these days are they're ridiculous in needing all these relievers every day. I don't understand how we've gotten to that point, but we have. And so that can be a real problem.
I want to start with this. 6-man rotation right now doesn't necessarily mean they're carrying a 6-man rotation a month from now.
Right.
Like this is certainly geared towards starting the season and
let's figure it out.
Exactly right.
And I'm
exactly
okay with
right.
that.
I'm okay with that too. 100%. What I'm not okay with, as we've talked about all year long with this staff, like, I don't know, do I need glasses? Am I mistaken? Has Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine and John Smoltz circa 1995, have they been walking in and out of that bullpen down in Jupiter, Florida? Have I just not been told? Is this rotation so good that it's lock and key, door shut, where McGreevy can't make his way in? I thought I saw the likes of Miles Michaelis and Steven Matz and Eric Fetty holding down some pretty critical spots.
But to be fair, because I think evaluation, and as you put a club together, you need to be fair-minded. If we're going to be critical, Matz has been pretty good. Maybe a walk or two too many. Yeah. Miles Michaelis has been pretty good. He's actually been pretty good. Liberatore hadn't been getting any starts, but he's been terrific.
Yeah.
And then some other guys have been bad. I'm one of those people. I am not worried about Sonny Gray. I'm really not.
Me too.
Despite the horrific numbers. And Fetty, to me, is kind of just being Eric Fetty, which is a 3-4-5 starter, 4-5 starter if you got a good rotation. So, but I do think performance matters, as I've said several times. Matz has been good, Michaelis has been good, and McGreevy's been great. So let's figure it out.
I think I look at it from if you're getting Matz starts, if you're getting Michaelis starts, and if this team goes out there and if they're 12-2 come late April and they're in first place, I mean, suddenly the tone around the ball club and the energy around the ball club will probably change dramatically. And then it's suddenly like, oh my gosh, could this team be good? And I think they might be good. They're going to be interesting regardless. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But looking at Steven Matz and Eric Fetty specifically, and throw Michaelis in there too, I guess they're all on contracts running up. If they're effective, there's a trade value that, I mean, we can argue the validity of Nolan Arenado moving and what they could bring back in return and the interest of other clubs. Like if those three pitchers look competent and maybe even, dare I say, good the first couple of months of the season, Rammer, their value will skyrocket. And there will be teams kicking the tires on all three of those guys. And suddenly the Cardinals have a trio of pitchers that they could do. You know, in Fetty's case, maybe he's somebody you still have long-term plans for. I don't know. Certainly Michaelis and Matz, you wouldn't. I wouldn't think unless they're on bargain basement contracts. So Rammer, suddenly those are guys that if other teams have an interest, man, I think that that raises the stakes a little bit, and I'd be okay if they're occupying spots in the rotation.
So, but we're talking about July. Nobody's going to make a trade for one of those guys in May or June. It just doesn't happen.
It doesn't.
It could happen. There's no reason. There's no rule against it, but it never happens.
It never happened. I feel like it happens a little more often now than it ever did before. Now, maybe it's not always for pitchers, but we've seen teams be aggressive in May and June, and suddenly they're off the gas when it comes to late July and trade deadline time. Like they've already made their move. You're right. It's not something that we see very often. I just feel like it's happened a couple of more times, especially for a team that thinks they're supposed to win. Like if it's the Yankees, Garrett Cole's already gone down. Carlos Rodon goes down after next week, and the Yankees become desperate. That's the kind of team I think would kick the tire on a move early. But you're right. You're more talking along the lines of building them up to maybe some interest in July. But I'm all for letting that happen.
But if you're advocating an earlier deal because some of these guys are good, and you're talking about the team being good at a given moment.
Right.
So can you move guys out and look around the clubhouse and say, yeah, you guys are winning, but we're going to take it apart anyway. That's a dangerous game to play.
It is. And I think it's a fascinating game to play. And because I think we talked about this before the season started, like what happens if this team is good? And if the expectation is for you to move guys at the deadline or earlier to bring back a package of prospects in return, how do you handle this team being good? I want to see it. And again, it raises the stakes. It makes things more complicated for those guys down there to try and put the pieces together. But I'd love to see it.
But if we were betting our own money, and you walk around with thousands of dollars in your pocket every day, cash. It's Brendan Cash Money Wiese.
Indeed.
But if we were betting, we wouldn't bet that the team's going to be good. We'd bet that they'd be mediocre at best.
Yeah.
We'd bet that a pretty good showing would be a couple games over 500. Wouldn't that be the bet?
Yes. It
so
would, yeah.
That probably alleviates what we're talking about with moving these guys. If you're a 500 club and you move a guy, people may squawk a little bit, and you don't worry about people anyway. What's going to make the organization better and give you some better opportunities? So it would be our hypothetical of the team being really good and then moving guys is not very realistic, probably.
And when it comes down to someone like a McGreevy or any of these other young pitchers, it's different than it was 20, 25 years ago, where I think the first thing you thought of was for any of your, and I don't know if McGreevy's a prized prospect. He's prospect, and he's turned himself into more of a valued prospect just in the last year. You'd wrap them in bubble wrap, right? It's like how many innings, and that's happened, 10, 15 years, but it's felt like it's ebbed and flowed a little bit, because now you're to the point where, especially some of these smaller market teams, like what the Pirates did with Paul Skeens, you also want to find a way to get the most out of these guys, especially pitchers, when their arm is live and when they're at their best, because pitching seems to be more fickle than it ever has before. And if you've got a starter that's running hot for a week, for a month, for a year, man, I'd love to get that production rammer at the big league level as opposed to AAA. I don't know how long McGreevy's going to be good, He's a cost-effective guy, and that becomes more of an issue next year as you start to build your club back up. And yeah, you've got contracts now. You want to figure out a way to do something with them. But the one thing McGreevy has done that we've talked about from the get-go, could he produce? All he's done is produce this spring and looked like one of your best pitchers in the process. So, man, that much like Victor Scott, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow if you've got to let him know, you're going to be on AAA to start this thing, and that'll be tough to wrap your head around if you're McGreevy or anybody else on this ball club.
Again, you've got guys like Gorman and Walker who are prospects, and you need them to do well, but they're underperforming. Then you've got guys that do perform, but because they weren't in your plans are a little bit behind in the pecking order, like it's not their turn. I just think that's a really tough pill to swallow for the players, which is most important, for the rest of the organization, which is second most important, and then the fans third and the media last. Who cares what we think? But I think that's a tough sell. I really believe that.
Yeah, no question. And it's a tough sell to everyone else in your organization. Like, there are guys coming up, whether it's Matthews, whether it's Hentz, or any of these other young pitchers that you expect to contribute at one point. What do you tell them? What's their pathway, right? Go out there, pitch well, you'll eventually get the call up. Well, here's a guy that's followed that criteria to a T. And if McGreevy's consolation prize is the ace pitcher of the Memphis Redbirds, man, that's a bummer. And he didn't earn that.
Brutal.
He earned a spot in this big league rotation.
Yep.
And again, to bring it back to the six man, if the 6-man rotation gives McGreevy a little bit of rope to work with early, and if he goes out there and pitches, so he's done it in spring training, right, Rammer? He did it last year at the end of the big league season. He's checked a few boxes. If he comes out again and opens the season, whether it's the 5th or 6th game of the year, somewhere down the line in this rotation, and he pitches well for a couple of starts in a row, isn't the club's hands tied at that point? Doesn't he have to stay in the rotation? I mean, he doesn't, but all the results say you're nuts if you don't let this guy continue to find his way. And maybe this is something.
As of today, if Scott's not your starting center fielder, and if McGreevy's not in the rotation, Cardinals are telling you that performance doesn't matter.
They're sending that message, and that's a tough message to hear if you're any of these guys that's played well in spring training. A guy that's performed well, and we talked about him a little bit in the last segment, is Lars Nootbaar. I want to get Rammer's thoughts on if this lineup, if his batting order would change at all with what we've seen so far this spring, and maybe more specifically around a Lars Nootbaar. We'll talk about that next. It's our Rawlings Redbird Report on the Big 550.
You're listening to the Redbird Report on the Big 550.
Powered by Rawlings and the Rawlings Experience.
Final segment of the Rawlings Redbird Report on the Big 550 KTRS. Our KTRS digital channels like YouTube. Watch the video, like the video, subscribe as we talk some Cardinal baseball with you here on the Big 550 KTRS. Rammer, I want to talk about Lars Nootbaar here, and we've talked about Lars a little bit, but here's someone whose spring training stats are awfully impressive when you think about whether you're a veteran or a young guy or someone in between. Like Nootbaar he's pretty established. He's had a few tours of duty now at the big league level, but it's not enough to say, like, he's not a superstar by any stretch, not even a star. He's a nice player to have. I've been really impressed with how he's had this approach in spring. Like, in spring, for some guys, you'd think, I need to go out there and hit 4 or 5 home runs. I need to drive in a bunch of runs. And Lars Nootbaar has had his approach, his like dream approach that you'd want him to have opening day of the regular season. I feel like he's had that approach all throughout spring. He's got more walks than he's got strikeouts, Rammer. His on-base percentage is over 400, and he's hitting the ball hard. Batting average, not great, but to me, that's not very important. We know this guy's a potential on-base machine. What have you made of his spring training so far, and what it might lead to here in the regular season when it comes to Nootbaar?
Well, it looks like that they're going to overload the top of the batting order, which is kind of a modern thing to do. You know, many teams, this is not a shot at the Cardinals. In fact, it might not even be a shot at all. It might just be the way the game is. But, you know, you would have had Babe Ruth leading off.
Yeah.
Ohtani does it.
Yep.
I don't really get it. But the metrics people for decades have been saying the best players need to get the best at bats or the most at bats. So, and if you just step back and just think about it, it does sort of make sense. And it sort of changes everything we've thought about in lineup construction since the 1800s.
Right.
It's really changed it. Having said all that, is Scott your leadoff guy? Is Wynn your leadoff guy? Or is Nootbaar your leadoff guy? Is he your Ohtani? And then does Contreras move up to the number 2 spot? Then do you have a left-handed number 3 guy like Burleson? Then do you go Arenado 4? So you can see how if you did that, it would change it around. Now, they like Wynn leading off, but Mason's had a very tough spring and he's got a bad wrist. It might be better for him to start out at the bottom of the order like he did last year.
Yep. Take
your time. You're in the lineup every day, man. Don't worry about it. Play great defense. The hitting will come around. We believe in you. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then you can overload the top of the order. So I think that that Nootbaar has done the kinds of things that we've expected. And if I've never really doubted him except that he can't stay healthy.
Yep.
So if he can stay healthy, I think they'll perform. Will he have the power that I hoped he had? I don't know yet.
I'll say this. Cardinals do not have an Ohtani on this roster. Anyone close to what Ohtani does to gift an Ohtani the number 1 spot in your lineup. And I'm not sure Mike Trout and the Angels, will he lead off? Aaron Judge generally bats second
or third.
Yeah. He doesn't lead off for the Yankees. So in this spot, you don't have an Ohtani, but I think Nootbaar's the closest thing to a guy that can get on base and draw a walk. The batting average is less important. And that to me, Rammer, is even more of a reason to bat him there. Now I get it. You only lead off once and then your order turns over and who knows, he might be batting 4th in an inning or 7th or 2nd, what have you. But I like him hitting 1. And then you mentioned it. I would put Contreras 2nd. I'd bat Brendan Donovan 3rd. And I'd let Nolan hit 4th because Nolan's thing, again, doesn't get on base a ton, but he does have a history of driving in runs, an RBI machine. That's his ML going all the way back to the Colorado Rockies. And again, maybe that boosts his numbers for a team that's looking at him later on in the year. So for me right now, yeah, I think my top 4 would be Nootbaar, Contreras, Donovan, and Arenado. Any disagreement or?
I think that's a legitimate way to go. It's not what I would do because I still think Nootbaar's got power. If it were my lineup, I'd probably go Scott Donovan to start the season. I know it's back-to-back lefties. And while I do think that can be important, just go hit. If I can't hit lefties, then I don't want you in the lineup anyway. And then I'd probably go to Contreras and then a Nootbaar probably, Arenado, Burleson, or I could flip-flop. It just, again, it depends on performance. That's the only thing I keep preaching when we talk about the Cardinals. How are you going to perform? The other reason I like Donovan, too, is because of his ability to go deep into at-bats, because I want to do what the Cardinals obviously don't want to do, run. And if I've got Scott leading off, I want to steal bases. I want to move him over by pulling a ball on the ground and have him go 1st to 3rd. Those are the things I want to do. If the Cardinals say, well, that's too old school, we don't care about the stolen bases, then take Scott. Yeah, okay, then you don't need Scott leading off. I got it. And you're just going to try and slug a bunch of home runs. Well, guess what? With this group, you'll fail. But if that's what you want to do, I get the philosophy.
I want to bring it back to our opening topic of Victor Scott. Does he make this team? If Victor Scott's on this team and he's your opening day center fielder, and what he did this spring, like his spring stats scream, lead me off.
Yeah.
Bat me 1. Home runs, stolen bases, on base, high average, like it's the whole shebang. Now, it's such a small sample and it's spring training, and that's probably not who he is. But in the off chance that is who he is, and again, that brings it back to if that is who he is, and you're not letting him try and parlay that at the start of the year, these guys are nuts. And if that is him, and they do somehow come to their senses and say Victor Scott's on the opening day roster, yeah, he is a classic leadoff profile rammer, and he's a new school leadoff profile because of his ability to hit for some power, get on. I mean, he does it all. And if spring training is who Victor Scott is, then he needs to be your one, and you don't move him from there the rest of the year.
And some of our other colleagues around the different media platforms, some of them at spring training, and obviously have the ear of the Cardinals. Or no, I'm going to reverse that. They have, they're listening to the Cardinals.
Yeah.
I think that's what the Cardinals are telling them, because I'm seeing too many of our colleagues sort of kind of going with the flow. Well, Scott will go down when they need to do it because of Gorman, blah, blah. They're playing the company game, and I don't like it. That doesn't mean what they're saying isn't accurate. In fact, I'm sure it is accurate.
Right.
And that's what's so frustrating, that it's not guys in our friends and colleagues in the media, Cardinals media, not making it up. They're just going with what they're told, right. and that's very frustrating to me.
With what Nootbaar's done this spring then, and if he's not leading off for me, then it becomes a little more of a challenge to where I put him. At least to start. Like
well, if Wynn's leading off, which they love him leading off, right-handed hitter, Nootbaar could hit 2 easily.
And he could hit 2 100%. But one of the reasons I like him as my one is because he just gets on base. And I feel
he's always done that.
And he's always done that. And because he doesn't hit for a high average, his bat to ball is evolving. If he's not my leadoff hitter, I'd almost moved on. I moved Nootbaar like not ninth, but I wonder if 6th or 7th would be a spot for him to where he's getting on base, kind of restart the cycle of your lineup when you turn it back over again at the top. If 6 or 7 wouldn't be for another on base caliber guy, like until he shows that the power is like back. And he's more of a run producer. I don't want him in my run producing spots in the lineup. I don't want him 2, 3, 4, 5. I save that for my guys that I know can drive in runs. Like Nootbaar hasn't shown me that yet. So for me, it's kind of like a 1, or if that's not where he can stick, I'd consider him 6 or 7. And maybe that's too low, but I think that'd be an intriguing spot for his skill set right now with what he's showing in spring.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
It depends on what everybody else is around him is doing.
Yeah. Like I want Donovan near the top, at or near the top. I want Contreras at or near the top.
I don't like the Cardinals in the spring have been playing Donovan in the 5 hole.
I don't like that.
Or 6 hole. That to me, that's a waste.
100%
because of his skill set.
Right, exactly.
And he's not going to hit 30 home runs.
Nope.
And so why have him in a power slot? I just don't get it.
And again, I feel like he's one of your best players. I want to get him as many at-bats as I can before it's all said and done. I want Brendan Donovan producing for me. Just a couple minutes left. We do have regular season baseball in the books, Rammer. The Dodgers are the Dodgers. And what amazes me is the amount of money they spend, but they do have a touch for finding guys in the lower payroll sector that produces for this team. Like Max Muncy doesn't make a bunch of money and has been an incredible productive player for them. They draft well, they scout well, they develop well. It's not just Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman. Obviously, they've spent wildly on their rotation as well. Like they've got the ability to spend, but that's not just a high spending team, Rammer. That's a smart team, and they're already off to 2 wins and
without Betts and Freeman.
Ohtani at the top doing his thing, and Sasaki was just okay. Yamamoto okay. I mean, they're not pitching deep in the ball games, but that's also that's modern baseball.
It's early too.
Yeah, 100%. Kind of cool to see the love those guys are got over there in Japan. 25 million people watch that game in Japan.
Really, it's good. I was on the Big 550 with McGraw Millhaven talking about playing in Japan and what we think, and not traditional to open the season, but marketing wise, it makes all of the sense in the world. So you got to be okay. Old school. I want the Cincinnati Redlegs, against the Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers. Okay, yeah, okay, I get it. But sometimes you got to be sensible.
Yep.
Got to be logical. Marketing wise, it's absolutely the thing to do.
And he is Ohtani's a bigger star over there than he is here, and he's a pretty darn big star in the United States. And it's a fast start for the Dodgers here in 2025. Rammer, appreciate it, sir. We'll cut it up next week, and we'll have a roster by then.
We'll have a roster. We'll be ready
team
to play, and we'll be able to complain some more.
Love it, Rammer. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, buddy.
Bob Ramsey, I'm Brendan Wiese. That is our Rawlings Redbird tonight. Appreciate our engineer on site here, Mitch Lawler, and we'll say so long for now on the Big 550, KTRS.com, and our KTRS YouTube channel.